All right, I'll be more of a host on this one.
It's okay. No, it's okay. No. I didn't have much to say.
Hello, welcome to Hat Trick. I'm Jordan Dollar Coltman. I am joined, as always, by my brother Braydon Dollar Coltman, and we have a very special guest all the way from chilly Winnipeg. Ray Strachan is with us. Ray is a diehard everything Winnipeg. He's a Jets fan. He's a Blue Bombers fan. I'm sure there's a half a dozen other Winnipeg sports organizations I don't even know about that he's a fan of. He's an artist. He's one of those guys that Braydon has been telling me about, wanting to get on this pod for so long. We're so excited to have you. Welcome to the show, Ray. How you doing?
I'm doing very good. That was a great intro. That's a lot to live up to, brother. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Braydon, how are you feeling this week?
It's always great when you can find people just as enthusiastic about sports as you are, namely team enthusiasm. Ray is a die-hard Winnipeg Jets fan, die-hard Bombers fan. He is a Steelers fan. I don't know, maybe he can let us know where that came from, but
yeah, for sure.
I'm excited to have Ray here. He's going to give us some really good insight.
All right, this should be fun. We got 3 good topics. Here we go. Here's topic 1. Okay, so obviously we got Ray here. We couldn't pass up a chance to have an actual Jets fan. I've never personally met a living, breathing Jets fan. I'm kidding. No, I have a lot of people who are like the old school Jet fans. You know, like people in my life who are from Manitoba or from the prairies. They those old Howard Chuck Jets, and then of course their hearts were broken. The team went to the desert, and they were left with nothing in the winter months. Yeah. And now they've come home. The Atlanta Thrashers became the Jets, like what? It was 6 or 7 years ago now. It feels like a long time though.
10
years already.
Season we're celebrating. Yeah.
Fantastic. So here's the thing. They're second in the North, this weird North division. They're second. They're chasing the Leafs, and they're being nipped at the heels by those Oilers. I think they're a point away. It's going to be a fun stretch down the stretch here. We talked on our trade special a couple weeks ago about whether or not they'd done enough. So we got a guy. Here he is. Ray, what do you think? How are your Jets doing?
You know, the optics and the standings, they look great. You know, second place isn't bad behind a very strong Leafs team. That roster is rock solid. And Edmonton, you know, they're sandwiched between a high-scoring, very fast team that can play many different styles. So we're looking good, but I don't know. You know, to be honest, I'm not confident going into these playoffs. I'm not confident going into a 7-game series with either Toronto or Edmonton, especially with what happened last night. I have no idea. To be honest, this is a fan thing. No idea why they're not running Stastny as a center. They should be running those 4 centers, Scheifele, Dubois, Stastny, and Lowry, and really spreading out that skill rather than playing 3 lines and having a shutdown line like they're playing 1980s hockey, which is absolutely puzzling to me. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Well, speaking of I fully support them and they're talented, but
totally
playoff time, I'm a little weary, to be honest.
So speaking of 1980s, obviously, you know, great battles with the Oilers and the Jets back in those days, Howard Chuck's Jets and Gretzky's Oilers. But, you know, the big thing both those teams always had was a guy in the back that could really just like shut it down. You had goaltending. I mean, you got a guy there who's a genuine number 1. Is he really the piece that if he can get hot, the Jets have a chance? That's what it looks like from the outside.
He is one of those goalies where if he stands on his head throughout the playoffs, and he possibly can without a doubt, then we do have a good chance of advancing. If he doesn't, we're in a bit of trouble. Our defense has been, decimated over the past 2-3 years. We really don't have a defense that can push the puck. So that really forces those centers to play responsibly defensive-wise and takes a bit of bite out of the line. So, Hellebuyck definitely has to have a Conn Smythe playoffs for the Jets to go deep, if not win everything.
Jordy Ben they added at the trade deadline. Was that enough? Clearly, you've already said that you're a little bit hesitant going down the stretch. What were your expectations trade deadline?
My expectations were for Cheveldayoff to sit on his hands, and he did. Jamie Benn, maybe a few years ago, I would have been excited about that addition. But right now, he's almost a depth player, which going into the playoffs doesn't excite me at all. Again, even if he wasn't a depth player, he's not one that can push the puck from the back, which we are having struggles with. So I don't know about that move.
There are so many different variables that go into making the decisions right now. The expansion draft coming up. You've got a shortened season. You've got quickly, tangentially, my fantasy team was decimated, and it was basically because of all of the COVID shenanigans with coming in and out of the lineup. And there's just so much that they had to consider, right? So with Cheveldayoff not making a move there, I think that is part of just the year that is.
So here's the question. You get the sense in other parts of this country, certainly in the let's call them like the big market parts of this country, right? The Torontos and the Vancouvers, the places where there's just so much additional saturation. The Jets and even sometimes the Oilers and the Flames, they get a little bit buried, but the Jets especially, they're sort of like the Ottawa Senators in the sense that diehard fans, but they get passed over so often because you've got these big market teams with these big fan bases. In Winnipeg, though, like the Jets have to be on like the number one topic going around at this time of year, right? Like you live and breathe it, right?
Exactly. That white wave isn't a joke come playoff time. Winnipeg fans are passionate. This with a city our size, there should be no way we could have had a white wave, but we did, and it speaks to the passion of the fans. It is from game one to the end, but it really ramps up in the last, home stretch of the season going into the playoffs. It's front page, every little move, every loss, every win. It's there, every injury. And you can't really hear anything else because especially during COVID, there ain't nothing else going on in Winnipeg, to be honest with you. So it's front page, middle page, and back page news right now.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? I guess we've all seen how this season's, Braydon mentioned it. We've all seen how the season goes. You get in there, we don't know what's going to look like. We don't know what team's going to stay healthy. And I don't just mean injuries. You don't know how a playoff series is going to go. But if you had to pick right now, let's say, I don't know if you're a betting person, but if you had to pick, who do you want to play in round one? Would you rather play the Oilers, or would you rather fall back and play those Leafs, or maybe get ahead of them and play Montreal?
Yeah. I honestly, in a 7-game series, I go Edmonton. I think we can out physical them if we go 7 games. My issue would be if Edmonton gets out in front, 2-3 goal leads. We don't have the horses, or they're not playing the lines right now that allow them to claw back like we saw last night when they're down 3-1. And we all knew here in Jets Nation that was game over. Because we don't have those lines, and Palmareese doesn't seem to want to, mix it up and put out 4 lines that can score right now. So let's try for Edmonton first round, because that's just a deep roster in Toronto. No hate against Edmonton. We struggle against Edmonton too. We can't contain Connor McDavid. Who can? But especially when we have pylons on defense. So
I'll tell you, I think the Edmonton Oilers are feeling the same way. I think the Oilers would rather that matchup than those Leafs too right now. So it could be a real fun series. I think, they match up really well in some ways. Like you said, there's some disparity there depending on which way the game gets going, but both teams, they need good goaltending.
Well,
they got to have
games down the year. Totally. Those games have been awesome between the two.
That last game, was it Smith that was in net?
Yeah. Yes.
He got the shutout and he was strong. Man. So
well,
that would be
fun to see.
We shall see soon. We're getting down to that final stretch here. That's topic 1 for this week. We'll leave it there. Hey, topic 2 this week is brought to us by Roma Pizza and Donair. Look, we all know that the best thing about Edmonton is the many Donair options. And I know if you're like me, it can be overwhelming and stressful trying to hunt down the best. Well, my friends, we have found it, and it's time you did too. Roma Pizza and Donair in Westbrook Aspen Gardens is Edmonton's best kept secret. There's nothing quite like piping hot meat getting shaved and served with a generous ratio of sweet sauce. And look, I know someone out there is saying, yeah, no, that's not really my thing. Well, hold your horses, because there is more. Roma Pizza and Donair not only serves Edmonton's best donair, but they also offer Roma's pizzas, dinner platters, chicken wings, chicken fingers, chicken nuggets, chicken tawuk, salads, subs, burgers, baklava, coconut cake, and with summer right around the snow-covered corner, they also have summer specials, deep fried pickles, and deep fried Oreos. But hey, don't take my word for it. Sometimes tasting is believing. To order, call them at 780-944-9696. That's 780-944-9696. They're open every day except Sunday from 11 to 11 and open till midnight Friday and Saturday. You can also follow them on Instagram at Roma Pizza Donair. Okay, topic 2 this week. It actually kind of comes back around to something we talked a lot about earlier in the year. We spent a couple episodes talking about the cancellation of the Isopol Cup, the women's league that tried to get back in the bubble there in the States. It didn't work because they got shut down by COVID. And we just talked about how unfortunate it was that women's hockey, just in a moment when, you know, the conversations about gender equity and in sport and getting more attention to the sport. And we've seen the network start to pick up women's hockey and even just women's sports in general a lot more than they have in the past. There seems to be this groundswell of finally, you know, the women athletes of the world are getting attention outside of Olympic years, where, you know, we've all watched women's hockey in the Olympics and it's hella entertaining. We all, you know, we've all remember those Haley Wickenheiser finals, or, you know, the women and they're just the dominance of the Americans and the Canadians when they meet in the gold medal. But we find ourselves again sitting here this week with another unfortunate case of a women's tournament being canceled. And this time it's the biggest one. It's the IIHF Women's World Championship. The event was scheduled to happen May 6th in Nova Scotia. Unfortunately, 2 days before the teams were set to come into the province to start their eight-day isolation prior to being able to start the tournament, it was canceled, just outright canceled. The provincial government and Hockey Canada, obviously with the IHF, decided it was not safe to do it. They felt like it was a threat to the sort of COVID security of the province. And I mean, there's a lot of politics and a lot of things that I'm sure that were a part of all of that, but it was canceled. And obviously for the women, it's devastating, right? You have to think about, this is the biggest tournament of the year. It's their Stanley Cup finals, all those teams that play all those years. And I guess the big question first is, why was there not another option? Why couldn't they take it somewhere? You know, the U18 tournament right now is happening in Texas for men. We saw the Christmas season, World Juniors happened. Those were safe tournaments. The athletes made it out okay. Is there a gender problem here? Is this a thing where the women's tournament just did not get the same kind of respect that the men's tournament did? You know, some of the players felt that way. I'll quote a couple for you. Sarah Nurse from the Canadian team. She said, "We've had conversations with Hockey Canada about the gender thing. It's hard to not see it through that lens. As a woman, seeing all these men's tournaments go on, seeing the boys, the World Juniors, they were able to pivot and one positive test, the team still got to play. That player was, you know, double standard." So Hillary Knight said, cancellation of the Women's World Tournament at the last minute this week was just another reminder that women's hockey continues to be treated as an afterthought. Let me be clear, the health and safety of the people in Nova Scotia is and must be the top priority. However, to cancel the critical tournament for women's hockey so close to its start with some of the teams already en route, it just feels like another slap in the face. So very strong statements from these women. You have to acknowledge that you know, they've been through a hell of a year when it comes to getting their sport out there. I guess I'll throw it to you guys with this. When you heard about this or when you think about this, does it not just feel like we've been down this road before and we're kind of seeing the same thing, Braydon?
Yeah, it's exactly what, you know, like we just saw it at the NCAA tournament, completely, you know, just neglected that aspect of the tournament. You know, the fact that this is constantly happening in a sense that, you know, they take some sort of responsibility after and acknowledge the wrongs that these organizations have done. But what's the action being taken? Where's the attention? There's just no attention being paid to this. And it's got to stop. Like they have to take charge. The fact that they can't have just another tournament, like you said, in a bubble, which all of these other tournaments have been successful in. The UFC just had 15,000 people in their full capacity event this last weekend. It's crazy that they can't just that they can't figure out another way here.
Yeah. Ray, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why there was a contingency plan. Don't get me wrong, I totally understand. There is a spike currently going on. We're in the midst of a third spike. So I understand. No, actually, I don't understand the last second decision. I don't understand why there wasn't a plan B. Especially when you mentioned, the men's tournament the location was changed because they did have that contingency plan.
Yeah.
And I believe the IIHF guy, HF guy was, it wasn't financially viable to have a contingency plan. Well, that doesn't make sense at all. You know, you have a contingency plan for the men. How can you not have one for the women? Yeah. It's pretty much straight up saying that we do not care about your tournament, that we will make a plan B for it while we're willing to do it for the men.
Yeah, no, totally. It does feel like, you know, we keep finding ourselves in these double standards, these sort of hypocritical situations where, again, these tournaments that are clearly larger generators of revenue. I mean, we have to accept that that is currently the reality of our world. The men's tournaments make a little bit more money. They make a lot more money in some cases simply because they've been given the platform to do that over the years. But that seems to be the only piece here. And we're not thinking about what kind of revenue opportunities are being missed for all of those women athletes. And more importantly, all of the next generation of women athletes who are looking at this and continuing to see their current heroes just taken out of the limelight every time they get a chance at that space. I mean, it's so frustrating. You know, I think back, I mentioned it off the top. I think back to those, you know, the Salt Lake City Olympics and how thrilling the women's tournament was in that Olympics. I mean, there have been Olympics when the women's tournament has been way more exciting and way more competitive than the men's. And yes, sure, we've got a couple powerhouse countries, and the Americans and the Canadians dominate it, but that's also because those are the only countries that have given the resources to it. Guess what? After those Olympics, other nations have started giving resources to women athletes because they get that attention. This is important. It's more important than just the hockey. It's about what it says about us as countries, us as athletic bodies, and us as sports fans. I'm not going to sit here and say I've watched every game of women's hockey that's been played in the last 7 months, but I can tell you I've watched a hell lot more this year than I've ever done in my life, because I've been given not only the opportunity to by the broadcasters, but I have also felt responsibility as a sports fan to do that, because I have become aware of my own prejudice, or maybe not even prejudice, but my own lack of engagement that was already there. Right? I watch what's convenient to me. I could admit that, you know. But I want to support those athletes because I can recognize for them. I mean, the men when they get to the professional level, they make millions of dollars. And sure, not every guy is ever going to, you know, be a Connor McDavid or an Austin Matthews or whomever. But those guys are given the keys to the cities that they play in, and they become heroes. We talked about the Jets 30 seconds ago, right? Those guys are royalty. These women work sometimes 2-3 other part-time jobs so that they still have enough time in their day to go to practice. They don't get paid for their equipment sponsorship deals. They don't get paid for their travel in many cases. And now they're just trying to figure out where the hell they're even going to play. Come on.
Yeah, it's a disgrace. 100%.
So I guess the question is this, Braydon, where do we go from here? What is the remedy? Is there a remedy other than just accepting, like Ray said, we need contingency plans here? Please, people, how many tournaments you have to have canceled to figure out you need a fucking backup plan?
The people, the people at the head, which seem to be like media, I guess. Like it's frustrating. It's a bang on the head every single time you have to think about the fact that just simply having a tournament is an important piece of, you know, of growth, especially for something that we continuously recognize as being underrepresented.
Where has this worked? Well, you know where it's freaking worked? It's worked in the WNBA. Okay. That is the only women's league I can think of right now who has found their brand, right? In North America. They have really figured out how to make it work, both financially and as an organization. They're the best run women's sports league right now in North America, outside of maybe the NCAA, and they have their own problems. We all know that. But the WNBA succeeds because they have attached themselves to the NBA. And more importantly, the NBA has attached themselves to them, right? The men's league, led by almost entirely men, has figured out this is a product and a brand that if we associate ourselves with is valuable to the larger NBA brand, and it enriches the sport in general. Where is the NHL? That's my question. Where is the NHL? Especially in Canada. Why isn't there a women's Jets team? Why isn't there a women's Canucks team? Why isn't there a women's Oilers teams? Why aren't those brands attaching themselves to these organizations using the infrastructure they already have? I know that the finances in the NBA and the NHL are completely different. I get that. But the finances of hockey and basketball are also completely different.
Yeah.
We don't need a multi-billion-dollar league. We just need these women to have a chance.
Yeah. Well, what the NBA is doing is they are literally saying especially at the beginning of the venture, they're saying we are willing to lose money to promote inclusivity and diversity and equality.
Yeah.
And I can't see any of this other sport leagues doing that, to be honest with you. The NHL can say, our profit margins are small compared to the other big three, whatever.
Well, I guess we haven't solved it, but at least we've done our part to continue the conversation. Hopefully it keeps happening. Cause again, you know, that if we let the conversation go, maybe nothing happens. We're going to get to a lot more about that in a second. This is topic 2. We'll leave it there for now. Do you or someone you know own a small business? Are you looking to grow or to reach new customers? Hey, why not let us help? Hattrick is looking for unique brands, businesses, and products to advertise on our show. You can find out how we can help spread the word about your business by contacting us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Okay, topic 2 leads us to topic 3. Braydon mentioned when we got Ray on this show that, you know, he had seen Ray had posted some things about politics and sports, and we all three of us have been active, engaging on social media at different times with people. And it's unreal how we seem to find ourselves constantly in these situations again and again and again, where whether it's, you know, traditional politics about, you know, where people are in on the political spectrum, or it's about specific events. And we've seen how sports throughout history has always found itself as a part of that. Politics and sports have always had some form of connectivity because throughout history, athletes have often used their platforms to express things. Not always things that the entire country was ready to hear yet. Colin Kaepernick. But look how ahead of his time Colin Kaepernick was when you fast forward only a couple years and we see the response to the murder of George Floyd. And we see how after the verdict this last week of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd, there has been an unprecedented response on social media. Every single North American sports team had a statement. They didn't have to do that. They weren't forced to do that by the league. They chose to do that. Why? Because we're starting to see that these teams are recognizing that their platforms are very big. Here's the question. When you are faced with people who respond in a negative way to athletes taking a political stance, how do you feel? Like, where are we here? Does politics and sports fit together? And how, if it does, how do we make it better? Ray?
Politics definitely has a place in sport, especially in America. Braydon mentioned that, I go off on my little rants on Facebook. It's my little cathartic release with the frustration socially in the world. But if you're going to have a sporting event where you play the national anthem and you expect people to stand for it, that's a political statement in itself right there. Taking a kneel to exhibit or to show your support of equality, racial equality in America, is an action of human rights. So I think we do have to clearly define what's political and what's human rights, because human rights should not ever be lumped into something as politicized. If you're a decent human being, it's something that you should support no matter what political party or affiliation that you're a part of. So I think that's a very important distinction to make. But in regards to history in sports, or political and politics in sports, historically it's been there forever, going back to the Olympics and at the beginning of the 1900s, and Sweden saying, screw you, I'm not going to go to your opening ceremonies because you didn't display my flag. So there's a history of it. The thing in America is, when you're exposing something very hurtful to a lot of people who control the system, there's going to be a lot of pushback to that. Going on these Facebook posts, there's usually one type of person who's against these political statements. It's not a lot of colored people, to be honest with you. And the people who are using the media to make statements against it are usually rich white people. So I think that in itself explains a lot. Sure, they don't want to see politics and sports when they feel attacked, when they feel that their way of life is being attacked. But when it's a show like the national anthem that supports their way of life, their Americana, they have no issues with it at all. Mm-hmm. So as a Black man, it's clear to me where their interests are and who they want to shut up and what messages they want shut down.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like it's selfishness too, right?
Yeah.
It's about what impacts me rather than what you were talking about, which is this this isn't about you or me or anything other than the fact that this is a simple human right. So if there's an issue here, then it's beyond everything about the sport, about, you and what you're going on, what's going on with you. But it seems like this kind of thing keeps happening when somebody feels like their sport is being threatened, or their thing that they attach to.
But isn't that the very point? I mean, isn't that why it works? Because the idea that we've allowed these sports to become so much a part of our identities as communities, that they have, we have built them up to be these really important things in our life. When that's disrupted, that's good protest, in my opinion. That's why it works. I mean, that's the whole point of it. Yeah. If we're talking about that instead of whatever the score was, then it's worked. That's the whole point. And like Ray said, I think this is true. It is really about which lens through which you look at this, because you're right. The anthem is a political act, just by the very nature of what it means, why we have a national anthem in the first place. So to have it at the beginning of the game, whether you want to trace the actual history of it being back to the fact that the military promoted it or not, the very act that it's there as a tradition is built upon two things. One, the idea of a community taking part in a collective act, but that collective act is an act of politics. So that when that's the piece of it, but even beyond the anthem itself, all forms of protest, we've seen, we saw this with BLM and the NBA restart, and how the league did, I certainly think an admirable job of trying to give their athletes some a bit more space than they had in the past to express themselves and communicate. But I think you're right. When these large media companies and these large sports organizations, which are really media and entertainment companies, are run by white people, predominantly white rich men, you're right. It's going to be their privilege through which they see the problem. And unfortunately, I think we have fallen too far into the trenches of that instead of listening to each other and figuring out what's really going on. We talked a little bit recently about how the NHL's dealt with this. For you in Winnipeg, Ray, does the NHL need to do more? I mean, we don't have a lot of players of color when you consider the number of players in the league, but I mean, they're more than we've ever had before. Is the league, is the NHL empowering their players enough to share what they think?
Sure. They are to a certain extent. I guess they are. I think it's a larger problem than them supporting their current players. I think it's a big systematic issue with the NHL and Hockey Canada. To bring it closer to home. If we look at if we look at amateur hockey in Canada, it still reeks of racism, especially against the indigenous people in our country. So until the NHL really wants to tackle that and get to grassroots, it very much to me is we support our players, but it's because it's an optic thing rather than something that we're passionate about. It seems like the NHL does a bare minimum, and they do the bare minimum because a lot of their players are white and because a lot of their audience is white. Okay, there's no real push like the NBA and the NFL get from their fan base about race issues.
These players have a platform. That's a fact, and I think they have the responsibility to be able to use it to affect their perspectives and their view on things. There's so much attention drawn to how many fans care and cheer for these people, and they have to be able to show who they really are too. It can't just be behind these the media of the business. They're not just pawns in the business. They have voices, and they should be behind. Like, I'm surprised that we haven't seen more people coming out, players coming out saying that this is unacceptable with the women's tournament being canceled. But I think when it comes to things like change, it takes those kinds of voices for the fans to get behind it and to be able to listen. A 10-year-old's favorite player is, say, Sidney Crosby, and Sidney comes out saying that this is unacceptable. That kid's gonna go, okay, the guy I look up to says that this is not okay. That's what it's that kind of momentum. And going back to the women's tournament, just the fact that there's going to be a whole bunch of young female athletes watching this, not getting an opportunity to watch these players play, and it just already knowing how much of an impact that has on a player's at a young age is it's huge. So it's frustrating. It's frustrating when you see that there is an opportunity to be able to voice an opinion and there isn't anything,
Yeah. And Ray, you said this a few minutes ago, though, that, yes, it's important players or athletes say things or speak up for it. And obviously it's very powerful when they do it. But isn't this also part of the same kind of systemic problems we see in other parts of society, where as long as the way the money flows from the top down is the way it is, athletes are always going to be put in a very uncomfortable position where they have to make decisions about whether or not they want to speak up for things because they're afraid of their losing their jobs or being I mean, again, Colin Kaepernick does not have a job in the NFL. That has to be ridiculous. Remembered every single day. Roger Goodell can go out there all he wants and have these kind of half-hearted, far too late apologies, if you can call it that. But the truth is, cost him his job, cost him his career as an athlete, as a starting quarterback in the NFL, a Super Bowl appearing quarterback. Was he the greatest quarterback of all time? No, he was never going to be that. But he probably had another 10 years on him as an athlete.
Oh yeah,
right. Yeah. And he lost that. So how does that? I mean, like you said, Braydon. Yeah, it's important when athletes step up, but if that's the ramifications, obviously a lot of them are keeping their mouths shut. I remember watching an interview with Ethan Bear a few years ago where there was a conversation. They were asking him about racism, and you could almost see how uncomfortable he was with the question. Not because I think he personally was uncomfortable with the question. He'd probably been asked or thought he probably knew what the answer he wanted to say was, but he even acknowledged, I'm a younger player and I'm not sure yet. That he was admitting he was afraid to say something. That's wrong, right? I mean, that's where the problem is, Ray. Am I wrong? No,
you're 100% correct. And it, like Braydon said, it does depend on allyship. Yeah. Because black players will step up and say their piece, but people get sick of the message.
Right.
Sorry to say, but that's the truth. That's the absolute truth of it. That's why Colin Kaepernick went down. People got sick of the message. He wasn't of huge value to team owners, and he seemed more of a liability financially to team owners, so he doesn't have a job. And I get it. Yeah, it's a risk, I guess, if you want to put your neck out there. But if you truly believe it's right, then you believe it's right and you say something. Mm-hmm. Black people, black athletes have been silenced for a long time because they were scared of losing their jobs. I'm sorry to say. No, I'm not sorry to say. That's the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So allyship is absolutely important in these movements.
Yeah.
And don't look at this as me saying, oh, the movement is dependent on white people, but a necessary part of it is the allyship and bringing other people in. Because if you don't hear from someone that you identify with, it's not going to ring as true. Sorry.
Yep, and there's opportunity for fans to be able to do that too, to be able to say that this, I paid this organization to give me entertainment and provide, a service here, and if they're doing wrong, then they need to be held accountable. It's just cyclical right now. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The hope, I guess, the hope is that we are starting to see maybe the teeniest little cracks in some of those foundations. We obviously in the last year have seen more organizations or more leagues have name changes. We talked about Edmonton a few weeks ago. I mean, how long did that take? And it only happened because there was enough pressure. And that's the thing.
There's no way it would have happened this year.
Pressure. Yeah. But pressure en masse is the key.
Yeah, if the Redskins didn't do it, it probably wouldn't happen. And the Redskins wouldn't have done it if FedEx didn't say they're pulling their money out.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, and we're even seeing that now when you look at the voter suppression in Georgia. Until the corporations all of a sudden say things, people go, what? But again, where were those corporations when the law was being drawn up? Right? Where was FedEx a decade ago? Where was, that's what I'm saying. That's the unfortunate part about it. Right. And I get that, as a white man, I could admit my privilege. I could acknowledge my privilege. it's hard for a lot of white people to do that, because in doing so, you have to tear down the myths about who you are as a people and about what our society is, and sports teams, sports organizations have built a hell of a lot of myths, right? There is a narrative there. And sometimes it's hard to accept that the narrative we have invested our energy in has some problems with it and that we've buried those problems, right? We talked about it with the women's thing. It's the same thing. Money, and all of those things make a lot of decisions for you. But the minute that you recognize that the narrative you believe in is broken or wrong or complete bullshit, you got to start questioning that.
Yeah, when it questions your identity, it definitely gets scary.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I got to say, I enjoyed this conversation. I enjoyed all three topics today. I want to thank you, Ray, for joining us. It was a hell of a lot of fun. I don't know how excited I am to play the Jets, but I know this. If we play the Jets, I know it's going to be a lot of fun. I do know that.
It will be. I'll be on the edge of my seat for every game. And I do think it'd be one of those series that goes to 6 or 7.
Totally.
Hopefully the Jets don't lose in 7 in overtime like our Philadelphia Flyers team did back 2 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
So Ray and I were on contract 2 years ago doing a gig, and naturally you set up a season on EA, you get some games going, and we got to like game 6, game 7.
It was crazy.
Can you describe the emotion you felt?
Oh in overtime, God. I've never fell to the ground playing a video game like that. I fell to the ground in disappointment losing that playoff series. Because weren't we down in the playoff series?
Yeah, we were down. We came back. We made some nice line adjustments. Overtime, and we just felt.
What is this, like NHL 19, NHL 18? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, 2018. Yeah.
I've never been so invested in a season like that, and to fall to the ground, it was heartbreaking. It still hurts.
Wow. Well, hopefully that pain can be made up with some wins from the Jets, and if the CFL ever comes back, the Blue Bombers. Thank you, Ray, for joining us. Thank you, Braydon. It's always fun. And we'll be back next week with another Dish to Hat Trick. Thank you guys both very much. That's Hat Trick. Hat Trick is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. It's produced every week by Jordan Dowler Coltman and Braydon Dowler Coltman. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening. That was fun. Thanks, guys.
That was great, yo.
Yeah, right on.
Thanks for having me.
We will have you back. There's something you're like, I really have something I got to get off my chest. Let us know. Just send us a message. We'll be like, hey, we'll have you on, and you can just give us your what for.